gosh, turned out to be a gorgeous day. I'm really excited to be here with you all. We're going to chat about wildflowers, about wildlife, but really whatever we see is open and on the table. My name's Sam. I work at Stoneleigh. I have a background in entomology and ecology, so if we see bugs, we will be talking about them. In fact, little Bumblebee flying around there. I scouted this morning. There's not a ton in bloom right now, but there's still plenty to talk about. And in fact, I missed this one when I was here this morning doing some scouting. Anyone know what this tree is?
Looks like a clethra, but it's not.
It does kind of look like a clethra. It is not, though. It is a really important tree species.
Is it an Nonenmacher?
It's not.
Black cherry.
Black cherry, yes.
That's a black cherry?
Yep. Yes. So a lot of
Holy
people
cow.
think of them as kind of these weedy plants because they do tend to spread. They love to spread the love. But cherries, our native cherries, are some of our most important species for supporting wildlife. They support over 400 different species of caterpillars. And these blooms, they don't smell very good to a human, but they smell really good to insects, and they support tons and tons and tons of pollinators. The flowers won't last long, but keep an eye out. If you're driving on 476 or something like that sometime today or this weekend, keep an eye out. You can see these blooming, and they're really, really nice. Also, cherries get some really lovely fall color. They're just spectacular for wildlife. If you want to add something like a black cherry to your garden and you're like, I'm not quite ready for something that gives so much, that's so generous, you can try choke cherry. So choke cherry is Prunus virginiana. It doesn't get as tall. Those flowers actually smell amazing, and they support the same types of caterpillars, which then support our birds and our other wildlife. So keep an eye on this tree. Check back in on it in the fall, and you'll be able to see that really pretty red fall color that happens. We've also got a plant right out here, this yellow bloom. It's just coming out of bloom now. Does anyone know what this is? Right here.
The yellow?
The yellow. Yes, amongst the mugwort. But you know, it's actually probably the best thing that could be in and amongst the mugwort because it's a fighter. This is golden groundsel. This is a fantastic plant. It's so cheery. It has really lovely, oops, didn't mean to pull out the whole thing, just wanted a leaf, but now you can see the growth habit. So has a really lovely round leaf with these cut edges around the sides. And this guy, I don't feel bad pulling this out because this plant spreads really nicely. So if you have an area where you're competing with an invasive species, you don't have the energy, you don't have the time to pull out that invasive, try adding golden groundsel. It's Pachyra aurea. Aurea, when you hear aurea in terms of a botanical name, that usually means yellow or golden. And so that refers to the flowers. Then it gets these cute little seeds. Again, evergreen at the base, which is awesome. And then it turns actually kind of a purpley red in the fall and winter too. So adds some nice interest. Also great for like tree wells, if you want to fill out a tree well so that you have a soft landing is what they're called. Again, really important for supporting wildlife, and just such a cheery plant.
And they'll do okay with the shade under the tree?
Yes, so in terms of conditions, they can do full sun as long as it's moist enough. So rain gardens are a really good place for this. It can also do part shade, and then that, you know, it can be a little drier, and they can handle that too. So really, really spectacular plant, great in the garden. And whenever I talk about native plants and you're like, huh, where do I get that? Our friends at Redbud likely have all of these plants available. And we love Redbud.
Yeah.
Do you think it would outcompete Liriope?
That's a good question because Liriope is clump forming and it's evergreen.
I know.
I would say if any plant's gonna have a chance, it's gonna be Pachyra aurea or golden groundsel. Sometimes called golden ragwort, but whenever we, like ragwort, not a cute name, right? It gets a bad rap. So not a cute name, so I try to say golden groundsel instead.
How about it versus English ivy?
So I have had some folks say that it works pretty well against English ivy. What I would do is I would try to pull up the English ivy, then plant, water it really well, and then it might have a fighting chance. Against established English ivy, probably not, but if you pull some things up and start adding things back in, it could work. Look, it's blueberry! Oh my gosh, someone can have a snack later.
We did choose edible plants for both sides of these in our last planting.
I love that.
Mislabeled, but
That's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is going to be high bush blueberry, Vaccinium corymbosum. Blueberries are also spectacular for supporting our local insect populations. There are some caterpillars that only feed on blueberry leaves, but more interestingly, in my opinion, is that these flowers that these berries used to be, they're very cute. They're overturned bell-shaped white flowers, and there are several different species of bees that only pollinate blueberry. That's all they pollinate. And that's because they're considered pollen specialists. So their baby bees back at the nest can only grow on the pollen of very specific plants. And there are several species that can only grow and develop on the pollen of our native blueberries. And then plus you get blueberries and you get fall color. So blueberries turn, vies with burning bush, red, shining fall color. Would I call this a great substitute for the invasive burning bush? Probably not in terms of like form, but in terms of color, yes. The berries will often be eaten by birds, so you know, if you're willing to pay the garden tax, pay the wildlife tax, you might get a few, and the birds will eat the rest.
How much sun does it need?
Blueberries actually prefer part shade. They'll berry better in full sun, but they definitely need moisture. Blueberries also prefer acidic soil. So if you've done soil tests in your gardens, obviously this one's doing really, really well. I think the well-draining nature of it works well for the blueberries, but if you've done any garden tests, as long as your soil's not super, super basic, I would give a blueberry a try. Mine's doing pretty well in my regular Upper Providence Township garden soil, So I am going to point this out, not a native plant, but this is the, this is Linicera macchii, which is shrub honeysuckle, and I encourage you to eat the flowers because that's one less berry that will form and spread into the rest of our forest. So you can eat the flowers themselves. You can make honeysuckle syrup out of it. I just saw a video the other day and I was like, I am very intrigued by that. But also these are the ones that once they're a little bit older than this, I think these are going to be a little young, you would like pull out the stamen and then there's that little drop of honeysuckle nectar at the base of the leaf. So I would say these ones are probably going to have that nectar as opposed to the really fresh ones. So pawpaws are incredible. Pawpaws are in a family, all of which, except for our pawpaw here, most of them are in tropical areas. But this pawpaw, Asimina triloba, which grows up here, you can find it in our forest understories, is kind of the only representative of this whole tropical family up here in temperate North America. So pawpaws bloomed, several weeks ago. They bloom pretty early. They have these overturned bell-like flowers, but instead of white, like we talked about with the blueberries, they're maroon and they stink. Anyone know why they would be maroon and stink?
Smells good to the
particular
pollinator.
It smells good to the particular pollinators, but pawpaws are not pollinated by bees.
Oh.
They're primarily pollinated by flies and beetles.
Ooh.
Because stanky and maroon, it's giving flesh. It's giving rotting meat. And so they are attracted to those really fermenting smells, and that's how this tree is pollinated. They'll sucker. So I think this might be a sucker. So they form these kind of dense colonies. They turn a beautiful clear yellow in the fall, and then they produce their fruits called pawpaws, sometimes called the hillbilly banana. But they have kind of a custardy mango banana type flavor to them. Some people don't like them raw. They are a little, if you're a texture kind of based person, I don't like the texture of them, but you can make pies, you can make ice cream. So, really great
male
plant.
and female, or are they all?
Yes, they're male.
Because we have 4 on Proclaim entrance that are the same size as this.
Yes,
and,
so
and only one is born true.
right, I'm pretty sure that they are dioecious, which means that they're separate male and female plants. And so you definitely need to plant multiple pawpaws in order to get really good fruit set, or at least be near another pawpaw. Some people will actually hand pollinate pawpaws as well, which is interesting. And also they support a specialist caterpillar called the pawpaw swallowtail. Is that right? No, zebra swallowtail. We don't really get them here, but if you go into York County is really interesting. There's like a bunch of southern species that pop up into York County. But who knows, with climate change, maybe we'll see more and more zebra swallowtails, but they only eat pawpaw leaves.
Is this an example where we may be removing that lowest branch and maybe another when we uncage it?
So actually, for this one, I would say leave those lower branches. Otherwise, you might this tree might become susceptible to buck rub.
Okay.
So I would say leave those lower branches. I might sacrifice the cage, or at least cut this part of it and pull it off, because that one branch will kind of be a deterrent for the deer who would otherwise, with that nice straight trunk,
Okay.
scrape it all up.
Okay.
Linda, I'm making some notes as we walk.
Okay, so there is a value to leaving lower branches.
There
That's
is,
good to
yeah.
know.
Does anyone know what buck rub is, or not know what buck rub is? Oh, there's some right there at the bottom there.
Oh my goodness.
So what the bucks do when they grow their antlers in the fall, when they grow, they're covered in velvet. And the velvet is where all the blood kind of goes, so it helps the bone grow. But once they're stopped growing, the velvet gets cut off, like the blood flow to the velvet gets cut off, and they need to scrape the velvet off of their antlers in order to be, the biggest, baddest buck in town. So they scrape off the velvet, usually on these straight trunked trees. And depending on the tree, depending on the size, depending on the buck, it can kill the tree. This one looks to be, surviving just fine, as long as it doesn't cut the whole thing. They'll also do it, they're just full of testosterone. They'll just kind of go to town on it. Oh my gosh, is the fringe tree kind of blooming? It's thinking about it?
It's trying. Mine is not at home.
Oh my gosh.
What is it?
It's a fringe tree. So Chionanthus virginicus. This is also, I believe, a dioecious tree. So there's going to be trees with female flowers and trees with male flowers. The male flowers are actually the showier flowers. But it's called fringe tree because, especially when they get bigger, it looks like it's completely covered in white fringe. And bonus, it smells good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're I think they're in the olive family. So they produce these interesting kind of roundish olive shaped fruits, but they're bluish, blackish, and birds really like them. So, I mean, fringe tree is one of my go-tos. It doesn't get too big, 25, 30 feet tall maybe. So when you're talking about a small space compared to like a tulip tree, which gets 70 to 80 feet, that's a very small tree. Smells good, gets some pretty nice fall color. Just a really, really nice tree overall.
Isn't that a jack-in-the-pulpit? A big thing or not?
This is jump seed. So this is Persicaria virginiana. So in summer, you'll see these guys are going to get long spikes of little teeny white flowers, and it's called jump seed because when those flowers turn into seeds and those seeds mature, if you walk by it, all right, so now you'll see a lot of this throughout the park. It's not a particularly showy plant, but it is a pretty cool one. Snake root, but it's not white snake root, which blooms in the fall that you might be really familiar with. There's many different species of this, or several, I should say, different species. I believe this is Sanicula odorata. I'm going to confirm. Well, it's got the yellow flowers. I don't know what is odorous about it, but it's not the leaves. But see those tiny little yellow flowers? They're not super showy, but they're small, and therefore they support small bees and flies, because not every bee can pollinate every flower. But even more interesting is it is in the carrot family. Can you kind of see how it looks like a carrot? So it's in the carrot family, which means that it supports black swallowtail caterpillars. So instead of it eating your parsley or your fennel or your dill, you can move them to this snake root because it's in the carrot family. They only eat things in the carrot family. So, not that this is like available for sale very often, but if you have it in a woodland edge or something, you could move those little caterpillars off any parsley and put them on something like this. And I do think it's pretty cute. Oh my goodness, look at this. I didn't notice this either.
Yes.
Look how cool this flower, or this leaf shape is.
Years that I said I'm getting it this year.
So this is called Agrimony. It's just a really interesting leaf. There's almost nothing that looks like this. See how it's kind of like fan shaped? Yeah. Some people at first glance might be like, it looks like a little something, something, something. But it's called Agrimony. It tends to like wetter conditions. And I haven't seen it everywhere, so these little patches are cute. It'll get like a spike of yellowish flowers. So just another cute, often underappreciated native perennial plant. Now this, anyone know what this is? I'll say it is not a native plant. This is Oriental bittersweet. So this is a pretty common invasive plant in our region. And see these flowers, it's flowering super nothing special about them, but they'll turn into red berries, sometimes yellowish berries, that will get spread around by birds. And this is a particularly tough vine because it likes to strangle things. So unlike, poison ivy is a vine as well. It's a native vine. Obviously we don't want too much poison ivy because people have reactions to it, but it does support wildlife, especially the birds. The berries are super nutritious. But the way that it climbs is it has these little like aerial roots, and they stick up the tree, and it looks like a big hairy vine. This is a wrapping vine, so it'll wrap all the way around a tree, and then it grows to a certain size. The tree tries to grow around it, and it strangles the tree as the tree grows. Now this is a great plant here. Anyone know what this is? So this is jewelweed. So jewelweed, spectacular. It's an annual plant, so every plant that you see came up from a seed this year. It doesn't come up from the same roots every single year. In the late summer, we'll see these covered in orange blossoms. And they're pollinated by bumblebees and sometimes hummingbirds, which is awesome. You'll often see jewelweed kind of growing in very similar conditions as poison ivy, which is very helpful because jewelweed, I'm going to sacrifice one of them, it is like a super juicy stem. It's almost translucent and super juicy, and what you can do is rub it on an area where you have poison ivy, and people say that it helps to alleviate the itch. And you can just crush all of these bits and rub it. People also say that it helps with mosquito bites and things like that. Anything itchy.
So let's sell it. Let's market it.
I know, right?
Put it on TV.
I think people do sell jewelweed based products. But it's also a really beautiful native plant. It is in what I would say enthusiastic. So it's another plant where you just want to plant it in the right place. It also gets pretty tall depending on the situation it's growing in. I think these ones probably won't get quite as tall, but especially as you get down to wetter areas, they can grow like sometimes it's called touch-me-not, because when they're like little teardrop shaped seeds or fruits, and when they are mature, if you just give them a little touch, they will explode and shoot their seeds out, which is so fun. That's the wood thrush. So pretty, really beautiful. Aha! So here is Virginia creeper, right next to poison ivy. How nice of them to be here together so I can show you the differences. So, Virginia creeper is called Virginia creeper because it is a creeping vine. It can grow up trees. It can also grow very well along the ground. That is the same with poison ivy. When they're growing up trees, Virginia creeper does not have hairs, or it doesn't have a lot of hairs on its stem, whereas poison ivy will look like, you know, Sasquatch growing up a tree. Virginia creeper's botanical name is Parthenocissus quinquefolia. Quinquefolia means 5 leaves, and that's where we see 5 leaves on this Virginia creeper. You all know the saying for poison ivy, leaves of 3, let it be. That's, of course, you know, this is not poison ivy. This is honewort, but it's got 3 leaves, kind of looks like poison ivy. So leaves of 3, let it be, great for very, very young kids or for like general safety. But once you start learning, you're like, wait a second, so many things have 3 leaves. But see all the teeth around the Virginia creeper here? Lots of kind of indents along the edge of the leaf. Now look at poison ivy. Not nearly as many.
It's smooth. The leaf is smooth near the stem.
It's smooth. It tends to be shiny, especially when it's first emerging. Those first leaves really shiny. There's some more right here. So some of them will have teeth. See here? There's a lot of variation, especially in poison ivy. This one does have teeth, but not nearly as many as the Virginia creeper. Virginia creeper gets a bad rap too because it is another enthusiastic native plant. Some people do have reactions to Virginia creeper, but many, many, many fewer than have reactions to poison ivy. Again, really, really beneficial plant. It supports a ton of birds, especially during migratory season. The berries are full of a lot of really important fats, and it gets incredible fall color, like bright red. So does poison ivy. But if I were to choose one to grow in my garden, it would be Virginia creeper. Okay, so I want to stop and talk about this cutie plant real quick. So this is, anyone know?
Witch hazel.
Witch hazel, yes. So this is Hemamelis virginiana. This is our native American witch hazel. This blooms in the fall and winter, early winter, and it's a great plant. Obviously, it's doing well here, especially as we walk up this way. We'll see even more of it. So it is fair. Oh, and look above you.
A big one.
Look, they can get really big. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I love them.
I know, they're very pretty.
So, witch hazel. Why does it get the name witch hazel? Well, first of all, whoever came and named it thought that the leaf looked like a hazel leaf. We don't really have hazel here. It's much more of a European species, but a lot of things were named by Europeans who moved here. So, but they called it witch hazel in particular because the fruits, which I can see some of up here, they're kind of little fat, roundish things. Those are last year's fruits. Oh, and you can see some right there on that branch. So the fruits, we're just talking about explosive dispersal today. So when those fruits are mature, a slight breeze could cause those fruits to shoot the seeds over 30 feet away from the shrub itself. And people would hear the noise and they'd see things flying through the air. And before we knew about explosive dispersal mechanisms, we thought they were witches who were causing these things to explode and kind of fly across the forest floor. That's at least one theory about why it's called witch hazel. It has a ton of medicinal properties, so the witch hazel kind of tonics and serums and things like that that you use are made with Hemamelis virginiana. And you'll see that there are these little weird growths on the leaves. Anyone know what that is called? Like this general leaf formation. This is called
Maybe
a
that's
gall.
a witch hat.
It's funny because they're called witch's hat galls. So you are very close. So they're called witch's hat galls. They're caused by an aphid. So when aphid comes in, she goes in, she lays her eggs in between the layers of the leaf. And then the plant responds by creating this weird thing. Essentially what it's doing is saying, uh-oh, this is like a disease. I'm gonna cap it all off so it doesn't spread. But that's, in the meantime, exactly what the insect wanted, because now it's got its own little home. The aphids feed on the leaf material, the plant material inside of the gall. When they're mature, they'll chew their way out through the back. And so you can tell when a gall is empty when there's a teeny tiny little hole on the back side of the leaf. These are pretty fresh. It's early in the season. These will probably emerge next month or two. And then sometimes these will turn bright red as the fall color starts to form. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's diseased. It's not diseased. The plant and the insect have been living together like this for centuries. So we don't need to worry when we see these galls on here. In fact, most galls we don't need to worry about. Witch's hat gall. Caused by an aphid.
So cool.
This enormous leafed thing here, this is called skunk cabbage. And this is one of the very first, probably the first plant to bloom in the spring. That's very generous of me to say spring because usually it's February. Produces these small little flowers. They're close to the ground. They kind of look like this. They're kind of like a cup with a little lid on top. They are maroon and they stink. So what is pollinating them? Flies. So the reason that especially this one is pollinated by flies is because when it is blooming, bees are not active. It cannot rely on bees. Bees emerge later in the spring. But flies, many of them, will overwinter as adults under leaf layers. So on a warm day, when the skunk cabbage is like, oh, I think it's time, the flies will emerge, they'll pollinate that, they'll go back underground, and the skunk cabbage gets pollinated. Interestingly, the flowers also produce their own heat. So that's important because say there's snow on the ground, but it's still a warm day. But we know that just because it's a warm day doesn't mean all the snow is melting. So the flowers are under that snow, they can't get pollinated. So they produce their own heat and they'll melt the snow just around the flower. So it's just the flower peeping out of the snow and the flies can come out and pollinate it. Really cool. And it's called skunk cabbage because these leaves kind of look cabbagey, and everything about this plant smells, not just the flower, but also the leaf. You can technically, I believe, eat the foliage when it's freshly emerged. You cannot eat it now, it is way too big. But when it's first emerging, I think you can eat it. Always do your research.
Sorry.
I don't think the deer like it because it's
He's a little bitter.
Yeah, tastes bad. Look how cool this is. Look at this. Do you see the bend in this tree?
Yeah.
So to me that means I think this tree is mostly dead with the exception of this. But to me this means that at that point this tree was here, it got blown over, it started correcting itself, and the rest of the trunk kept growing. That's what that says to me.
Wow.
And I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think these kinds of trees were very important for indigenous peoples. They used them as very important navigation markers. So something like this, they would use to help people find their way.
And the one next to it almost has a
Wow,
spiral.
look at that. Oh my gosh. And this is so unusual for this plant because this is a tulip tree.
Right.
Tulip trees are known for growing straight as an arrow. And so for it to do that at the top, again, something happened. Maybe a tree fell onto these two individuals.
That's wild.
Even this one has a curve to it. Wow. It's a really good mechanism for identification for tulip trees, is just how straight they grow.
You think what happened was more dramatic than just seeking the sun from around another bigger tree?
Yes, I think with that specific of a curve, I think it was more than just something seeking sunlight. That is very cool. Many of our birches are the trees that we're seeing that are especially affected by climate change. We used to have yellow birches, we used to have paper birches, gray birches growing in Pennsylvania, and we're seeing they are very, they're not well adapted to hot and humid climates. So river birches doing just fine, but this kind of very traditional birch that you would see with the stripes on the bark and the peeling, it is not surprising to me that this tree is no longer alive. But it's serving as a very fun little stream crossing. So right back here, this looks like maple leaf viburnum to me. And it's about to bloom. Maple leaf viburnum is a spectacular native viburnum. Oh look, there's some more over here. Oh, what a oh my gosh, y'all, this is a lovely, lovely plant. It turns in the fall. Oh my gosh. Okay, I totally missed. Look, there's so many more over there. Yeah, this is really where it likes. It likes this kind of mild slope. Viburnum flowers are great. They really support a lot of insects, especially beetles, because they're open and accessible flowers. Where we compare that to the jewelweed, it looks like a pouch and it really needs a bee or something that's specialized in order to pollinate it. You all should definitely come back here in the fall. These leaves turn like pink. It's crazy. They turn like a pinkish red and they will just shine through the forest floor. Viburnums are also good. They support several different species of specialist caterpillars. They're just great, beneficial plants for wildlife, for humans, aesthetically, just gorgeous. And they'll produce berries in summertime. So typically when we talk about berries that are produced in summer versus berries that are produced in fall, berries that are produced in summer are going to be high in sugars. So they support birds as they're flitting about. They're doing all these things because there's tons of bugs. They don't need protein. They don't need a lot of fats. They're getting that from the insects that they're eating. So the berries are high in sugars to help support them in their other endeavors that they're doing because they're staying here. When we talk about berries that are produced in the fall, they're going to be really rich in fats because they are often supporting birds that are going to migrate. So they can't do it on sugar. It's a really fast energy. They need a slow burning energy like a fat. So berries in the fall are going to be producing high fat content. Oh, there's a bumblebee. There's a bumblebee queen at the bottom of that group. See her flying? There she comes. Okay, so that's a bumblebee queen. The reason she's floating low to the ground, she might have a nest in here. I can see it. I'm good. I got her. She's flying up the space here. So bumblebees create nests underground. Oh, I think she went under. Oh, I think her nest is back there. So bumblebees are very cool. They have an annual life cycle. Right now we're starting to see some of the workers come out, but typically earlier in the spring we'll just see the queens. They're big, they're fat, they're fuzzy. They're looking for nectar, they're looking for pollen in order to support them finding a nest, and then they start a nest by themselves all from scratch each year. So she's already mated. She mated in the fall. So she'll start a nest underground. Depending on the species, it can be just about 100 individuals or it could be up to 400 individuals. Our common eastern bumblebee produces the largest colony sizes. So she's building the nest, then the workers come out, they'll collect all the pollen, they'll help raise the young. She keeps going, the nest gets bigger and bigger. As fall starts to roll around, they'll start raising the queens, and then they'll start bringing out the drones, and those are the males. So the drones go out, they feed a little bit, they'll mate with other queens in the area. The queen that's mated, she's the only one that survives the winter. All the rest of the bumblebees will die with the first frost. And then the queen overwinters, usually under leaf litter, and the cycle starts over again.
But they do not sting. They don't have stingers or anything like that.
They do. So all female bees can technically sting, because a stinger is just a modified ovipositor, and an ovipositor is an egg-laying device, and only females lay eggs. So the males are usually the ones that can be like a little like, hey, watch out, but they can't sting. And bumblebees are very hesitant to sting. So really, unless you're stomping on their nest or you're grabbing them, they are very hesitant to sting. They're not very territorial. They'll use their size more than they'll use their stinger. And then here we can see the dying, or really senescing leaves of trout lily. So here's still a good looking one there, but they're not dying. The whole plant isn't dying. This is an ephemeral plant, so that means that it's only up for a couple of months. So this plant has already bloomed, it's already set seed, and now the leaves are dying back because the canopy is filling in and they're not getting as much sunlight as they want. It's called trout lily because someone thought, hey, that kind of looks like spotting on a trout. I don't know my fish well enough to be judgmental or not about that name, but that's why it's called trout lily. There's a couple things I'm going to point out here as I sit against my lovely tree that I can't identify right now. So firstly is false Solomon's seal, which is a very cute, also ephemeral plant, although this one really sticks around well into the summertime. These little flowers will be pollinated by tiny bees, little beetles and flies, and then they will turn into beautiful berries that birds will eat. So this is a really nice one. It'll form colonies if it likes it, and then you'll have like a nice little carpet of false Solomon's seal. Not to be confused with true Solomon's seal. And true Solomon's seal, when they're in flower, they're easy to tell apart. False Solomon's seal, also called Solomon's plume, which refers to kind of this flower arrangement. But true Solomon's seal gets two bell-shaped flowers in pairs along the entire stem. But then they do turn into bluish berries. I wanted to point out, and now I've totally forgotten where it was. So this is wild ginger, which is a fabulous ground cover. This is looking like a beautiful patch here. And ginger is really cool because it produces its flowers all the way at the base of the plant. So these are old flowers. Now I saw a really good one. Oh, here, right here. So this is a little bit more recent. See how it is? See how it's also kind of maroonish brown?
It's red, yeah.
Down by the ground. So this one is mostly relying on beetles and ants for pollination. So by being really low to the ground, it is much more accessible for those small ground-dwelling pollinators. It's not an evergreen, but it does last for a really long time. It forms these lovely clumps. Here in the shade, these leaves are about as big as they'll get, but if it has enough sun and enough moisture, the leaves can get up to this big. Great in the garden in a part shade situation. Great at suppressing weeds. You can see that it's doing a good job of kind of being one of the only plants around. But it plays pretty nicely with other things too. There's a history of horticulture here in Glen Providence Park. So, you know, we have all of those spruces. Those are not native plants. This isn't necessarily a fully native or, you know, even natural ecosystem. And so you do have some of these things, liriope. And again, here it makes sense. that there might have been more of a garden because we've got the Liriope and we've got the Japanese Pachysandra over here too.
Old photos show that this may have been a dairy farm, and I'm trying to think on which side of the Glen.
Oh yeah, third was the dairy farm.
That was the dairy farm.
All
and
the way up
then
Third Street.
The pines or the cedar were planted intentionally. And I think harvested for shingles. Maybe that's why we named it the Shingle Milk Trail.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always interesting. These plants often will tell a story. So when I see this patch of Japanese Pachysandra, when I see this Liriope, I think to myself, someone was gardening here in some way. Or there used to be an old homestead here. If there are daffodils in the park, that also is often a symbol of there used to be a homestead or someone living here. All right, so I just wanted to stop here to talk briefly about the absolutely beautiful purple trees over here that are an invasive species called empress tree or princess tree, Paulownia tomentosa. So tomentose means like fuzzy, so they have big fuzzy leaves. They're growing all along 476 right now, so I've gotten a lot of questions about them. People are like, oh, what's that? Do not plant, do not plant. First of all, it's one of the fastest growing trees in the world. And secondly, it will spread. It will spread. It's weak, weak wooded, it cracks, despite them being beautiful. All right, we've got a poison ivy look-alike.
Huh.
Not poison ivy.
No, but that is a real look-alike because it
Real
doesn't
look-alike.
have the...
But this doesn't have any teeth on the leaves. So this
and they're
is,
so pale.
yes, this is American hog peanut. Hold on. Amphicarpa bracteata. It is a
Stop with the
ground.
Latin.
It helps me. It helps me. So it's a cute little ground cover. It's in the pea family. It gets little swoops of, they kind of look like snap pea or what am I thinking of? Anyway, they're like little purple sweeps of flowers reminding you of sugar snap flowers or something like that. So in the pea in the pea family. So therefore it's going to be supporting a whole different group of caterpillars, in particular the caterpillars of silver-spotted skipper. Silver-spotted skipper, which is our largest skipper species. Skippers are types of butterflies. They're beautiful. They have a big silvery spot when they close up their wings, and their caterpillars are going to eat anything in the pea family, including American hog peanut. So, I think the last plant I'll highlight today is a lovely plant called spicebush, Lindera benzoin, or benzoin, however you would like to say it. And I am going to, I don't generally recommend this, but I'm being careful, crush that up and smell it. Crush that up and smell it. Pass it along. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's awesome.
Doesn't that smell so good? Yes. So there's several reasons that it has the name spice bush. First of all, you can see it as a bush, which is spectacular. They are dioecious plants, so again, there's going to be male plants and female plants. That's likely why when I was scouting, I saw some, I'm looking for the start of the berries. That's why I didn't see it on some of the plants as we were walking up here. So called spice bush because the leaf has a nice spicy kind of fragrance to it, and these little berries you can actually harvest. You can take out the inner part of it, you can crush it, and it's kind of the equivalent of like allspice. I would recommend, if you are interested in learning more about foraging, that is not my expertise at all. If anyone is on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow Black Forager. Her name is Alexis Nicole, and she is awesome. She's super enthusiastic, and she talks all about foraging. She's based in Ohio, but a lot of things that happen in Ohio also kind of apply to us here in Pennsylvania. So she talks about harvesting these. So they have just started to form. They'll get much well, not much bigger, but they'll get a little bigger than this, and they'll turn bright red. It's a nice berry for our bird species, and as you can see, it's growing all over the place in here. It is a deer-resistant plant, which you love to hear. So deer do not bother it. As you can, most things with like a big fragrance, a strong fragrance, are going to be deer-resistant. And then lastly, if you like butterflies, Spicebush supports the very aptly named Spicebush Swallowtail caterpillars.
Oh, I've seen those. They're really cool.
They're so
ugly,
cool.
actually.
They're really beautiful. They are.
They're ugly.
No, they're not. They're really beautiful. They are weird. They're a bit alien
Yeah,
looking.
they're kind of kooky.
They've got a kooky kind of face to them, but they're very. Okay, maybe
I
beautiful
agree.
was
They're beautiful.
not quite the word for them. Adorable, perhaps.
Striking.
Ah.
Let's
Striking.
compromise on
Striking. I
You're
like
right.
that.
Striking.
So what they'll do is you'll often find them, they'll kind of curl up a leaf like this. So if you see a leaf curled, kind of like this on a spice bush, very gently look through that little hole and you'll see their giant alien-like face of the caterpillar. They can get pretty big and they're just adorable. So they only feed on spicebush and sassafras. Spicebush and sassafras. So this is a fantastic plant. It gets really nice yellow fall color as well. It's a woodland species, so grow it in part shade. But as you can see, they can get pretty tall. So once they get to a certain point, it's nice because they can at least tower over the multiflora rows a little bit. Yeah. So this is Itea virginica. This is an awesome plant. It is so adaptable. Anywhere you put it, dry, wet, sun, shade, it'll do it. And gets really long, like racemes of white flowers. They do smell pretty good. And then some of the best shrub fall color ever. I feel like that's been a theme today. Fall color. Brilliant reds, maroons, and oranges. Really, really spectacular and beautiful.
So take out your burning bush and put in this.
Yes, that's a good one. Yes, that's a great idea. Doesn't get as big as burning bush, but much more beautiful than burning bush, which I think I saw one over here somewhere because it's also blooming right now. But all right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and hope you learned a little something today.